Hey guys, welcome to the Asian Hustle Network podcast. My name is Brian.
And my name is Maggie.
And we interview Asian entrepreneurs around the world to amplify their voices and empower Asians to pursue their dreams and goals.
We believe that each person has a message and a unique story from their entrepreneurial journey that they can share with all of us. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Asian Hustle Network podcast. Today, we have a very special guest with us. His name is Peter Shiao. In 2018, Peter was having a massive moment in his career and poised to launch a 10-digit global investment fund with bold-faced global names that was the culmination of a lifetime of preparation in a US-China collaboration. 3 years and 3 hard pivots later, he would end up launching the company of his dreams, literally. Peter Shiao is the founder and CEO of Immortal Studios that is building an all-media storyverse dedicated to the martial arts fantasy genre known as Wuxia, starting from comic books. He is a serial founder in East-West Entertainment and Media Ventures and has also led California-China cross-industrial collaborations across multiple industries. Peter, welcome to the show.
Good to be here. Nice to see you guys.
Yeah, Peter, we're excited to have you on the show. And before we dive deep into your childhood, I want to hop into.
I didn't know we were going to cover my childhood.
I want to cover that, Peter. Before we dive deep into that, I want to cover your fascination with the story Journey to the West. Mm-hmm. You know, because that was also my fascination growing up, and one thing that keeps me motivated. And I think about it from time to time too, how like the lessons I learned, I could incorporate that into my life.
Well, look, who doesn't love the Monkey King?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Who doesn't love the Monkey King? The monkey is just such a fabulous, fantastic way to get into Eastern fantasy mysticism. So all of his different journeys. I remember growing up, I was a kid in Hollywood, even though I was born in Asia, and I happened upon the Journey to the West cartoon, which I just loved because, you know, back in those days, you just didn't see anything Asian on television. Mm-hmm. The fact that I grew up reading it in its original form was just amazing. Of course, later on as an adult, as I really got into Eastern philosophy, even doing things like managing the Shaolin Temple brand for movies, television shows, I really got an in-depth understanding of what was actually involved. So there's actually a deeper reason why Journey to the West continues to exist, because it's got, you know, little jewels of enlightenment that's embedded into it. And that's why I still love it even to this day, because in so many ways, our journeys as people or souls are very much like the Monkey King. You know, It's like our ego getting worked until it's also the journey of an entrepreneur, right? Mm-hmm. From pure potential to somebody who's subdued and work things out until you can actually make it all the way home.
I love that. I love that. And for our listeners, Journey to the West is a very classic Chinese, or not even Chinese, like Asian folktale, talking about the journey of Monkey King.
Yes, I grew up watching Monkey King. I would watch it every single day. And my mother and my father were both like, you watch too much Monkey King.
I know, I love it.
It's such a childhood memory for me.
But yeah, let's dive into your childhood in some ways, you know.
It's become global. I mean, it truly has become global. And I think we're going to see a lot more of the Monkey King.
Yeah, I love that. Especially with your work too. I wouldn't be surprised if we see more inspiration from that.
In fact, we've designed a whole universe that's devoted to that really fantastical world as part of our Immortal Storyverse. And of course, we can talk a little bit more about that later. But you really want to know about my childhood, so let's go.
I want to hear more about it because we listen to other podcasts and we hear that your father is a very inspirational man. And we want to hear about the kind of childhood that you had and the kind of impact that he made on you and your life.
Well, you know, it's a long story because you want to know about my father, right?
No, we want to know about you.
Well, I was born into this really traditional Chinese family. My father, one of the big reasons is because my father is a martial arts fantasy writer. Mm-hmm. So he's literally the only job he's had ever since he was maybe 22. He became a best-selling author in Taiwan at age 22. Wow. Has only had one job his entire life. He would go on to become one of the 4 or 2, depending on who you listen to, one of the top martial arts fantasy creators in the past 100 years. There's a saying in China, Jingyong of the South and Shaoyi of the North. So they literally carved it up into two great creators. And of course, Jingyong, Louis Cha is the Condor Heroes, it's absolutely the phenomenal writer. So because he was my father, he didn't really just treat it as a profession. It was his life. So in some ways, I was raised in ancient China. I was raised in ancient China, and before I even went to school, I learned how to read his books. And he always kept a very sizable library at home, not too dissimilar. Like a lot of my collection actually comes from him. I'm surrounded by books, and I started collecting myself. So I was born into this really beautiful, mystical, amazing, very proud world that was kind of the ancient martial universe. For people who like that kind of storytelling, you would know it's a world of heroes and heroines. Mm-hmm. It's a world where we have infinite potential. We have really big stakes. And of course, that was very different from how I was my physical life. So the first 9 years of my life, I was actually in Taiwan. And then my family immigrated. And then we went to South Africa, and I lived in South Africa, and then I lived in an African kingdom called Swaziland. And that's when I was first aware of the concept that the world is actually a very diverse place. So from a kid who was in a completely kind of Asian or Chinese environment, I all of a sudden realized there was racism, there was diversity. I was living in Africa as an honorary white, and why was that? And then after a brief stint through Europe, I got dropped in the middle of Hollywood. That was kind of the cross-section of all the things that was, so as a 10-year-old, I landed in Hollywood. So I still to this day consider myself that I'm from Hollywood. And this is where I kind of went my separate ways with my dad, because he stayed in ancient China writing his books, and I became a skateboarder and fell in love with kind of just trying to be a Western kid back in the day. So I've had a very East-West upbringing, almost like two different extremes. So to this day, I still consider myself a Hollywood native, because those were my formative years were spent in Hollywood.
Wow, I love that.
Yeah. And you mentioned your father, Wuxia was a way of life for him. Did he kind of have any plans for you to take this as a career path, or was it more of like him sharing a hobby with you? It's really who he is. So like a lot of people have different types of dinner table conversations. Mm-hmm. Our table dinner conversations were Wuxia heroes, and the guests are at home were like fortune tellers or martial arts masters and Qigong masters. And so those were his interests. He didn't try to get me there. In fact, he tried to talk me out of having a career in entertainment or media or content oriented. I think he also had the thing that, because even though he succeeded, he was just one of the seldom, very, very few that can actually make a living that way. So he wanted me to be stable and be everything that his life didn't afford him. But ultimately, I had my own path. But it wasn't until much, much later until that our paths would converge. And literally, when you read those stories, when you kind of read the opening, how I got here would be a series of pivots as an entrepreneur, and that I finally ended up in the place that it ended up. It just felt like I was meant to be here. So it was not something that any of us could plan for, but I would say that starting from even 10 years ago, it started to become clear, because for some reason, my life would always come back to these themes, even though I wasn't necessarily trying to be here. Mm-hmm. I thought I would be in politics. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, that was amazing.
Yeah, that is incredible. And talk about your transition, just growing up in Hollywood. What was going through your mind at that time? I know you were super young, but just, coming from China and kind of growing up in Hollywood, what was it like for you?
Well, first, there was definitely a transition. I think there was a transition. There was a language transition. But just to correct that, I was born in Taiwan, which is kind of different from China, but though, identifies Chinese American. So the language was different. The customs was different. Frankly, I was a little disappointed because I thought America was supposed to look like Disneyland. I looked around, I was like, really, this is it? By then I had traveled to, I've been to France, I've been to Paris, I've been to London, I've been to all these great capitals of the world, and I landed in the States. It's like, wait, I thought this was, it was kind of a fun environment because Hollywood had a really, really fast crowd that I instantaneously bonded with. So these were like the music people, these were the musicians, there were the rockers. It was kind of a really interesting place. So I kind of was comfortable, and it was also a very diverse place. It wasn't, because a lot of people, I think a lot of Asian Americans had this very homogenous experience, but I was probably one of the most diverse places on earth. I met people from Korea, I met people from Armenia, I met lots of West Side Jewish friends, I had Latino friends, I had gangbanger friends from all types of races. So it was an incredibly diverse place that I just kind of thrived on.
Yeah.
And so I actually was able to formulate a lot of my own ideas about diversity and multiculturalism. But other than liking all of those things, I was basically checked out as a student. I was, I hated school.
Yeah. I mean, it's really awesome hearing about your story and your perspective, everything, because you have such a enrichful life. You get to travel the world and see everything. The most ironic thing is, Disneyland is actually in the OC, not LA. It's so weird.
It would take me 2 years after coming to America that I would go to Disneyland. I remember the first time I went to Knott's Berry Farm thinking that I was going to Disneyland, but
But yeah, I'm kind of curious about like some of the stuff that you're working on before Immortal Studios. I know you had such a long history of helping other organizations, politics and everything. I want to hear about like that transition in different eras of your life and what led you to creating Immortal Studios.
Okay. But Immortal was kind of, I'll just start roughly that, when I graduated from college, my first love and commitment was in public service. So I actually had the chance to be mentored by the mayor of Los Angeles, then Mayor Tom Bradley, who just, through pure luck and circumstance, I had a chance to work in his administration, which transpired into lobbying for the city of LA after I graduated. So it was just one of those, this is a time when there was nobody who looked like me in politics. Nobody who looked like us, was kind of a fluke. And I went to Washington, D.C., and I had a chance to work on Capitol Hill as a very young man. And I decided that I was going to come back to LA and eventually seek electoral office. So I came back and I worked for Asian American legal advocacy for the Asian American Legal Center. This is right before the LA riots. So there's a lot of racial tensions, and I got involved in doing community-based mediation between African Americans and the Korean grocers. And also there was a lot of racial tensions around. So I was actually trained as a federal mediator. When there was brewing tensions, even sometimes between the Crips and the Bloods, we would be called in to provide like real mediation. So then I had a chance to go to the state capitol. So I actually went into politics. I'm going to kind of cut down my story a little bit. Just long story short, I was ready to run for office. And then I had a big awakening that, number one, I didn't want to wear suits 7 days a week. Number two, for some reason, I wanted to tell stories. And the realization came, I was running the California Senate Committee on the Entertainment Industry then. So I was literally one of the key persons in charge of making laws in relation to the industry. But I saw all my political bosses. They were some of the heavyweight politicians of our time. They had a really hard time getting their message out. Even being in politics, what I experienced actually was not being powerful, was being powerless. Part of it is it was so hard to move public opinion. And the only place that I saw that happen was through storytelling. I just felt like there was an ease when you share a story, you could actually move someone's emotions. So after a long soul searching process, I gave up my suit. I said, you know what? I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I'm going to go into the entertainment industry. And that furthermore, I didn't want it just to do it onshore in America. I wanted to go to China. I wanted to go to Asia and experience this other side of me. So there was this roots thing. So that turned into a 20-year career where I would eventually launch 7 companies, half of them in the entertainment and media businesses. I learned to be a movie producer. I learned to be to run investment funds in the entertainment business. I learned everything about marketing, technology, how do you run studios. I sold a few of my screenplays. So I lived a Hollywood dream, and from basically just having an idea. But the closer I got into it, the more I realized also as an entrepreneur, it's really about, I really cared a lot about representing, not just for political reasons, the Asian people, but I really felt, I've always, in my own different explorations, as I spent more time and I evolved a lot more in my own personal exploration, I really became a student of Eastern culture and philosophy and spirituality. I really fell in love with a lot of these classical ideals that I think it's so disowned by this modernity. And I really felt passionate about it as an equalizing force to extreme Westernization, which I think has taken our world to the brink of destruction. Mm-hmm. I don't blame it on the Westerners. I think it's a philosophy of growth at all costs, of not taking a balanced approach, not taking an intuitive approach. So it's really the counterpoint to that. And the kind of entertainment that actually embodies these ideas has been wuxia, has been the martial hero genre. Everything I learned about brand building, everything I learned about building a studio, and how hard it is to really get content with Asian faces and ideas front and center of it, coupled with what I understood about the genre that there's a worldwide fan base for, but not a home for. And then my lessons in technology and prototyping and MVP led me to really appreciate how you can be very disruptive in today's entertainment and media circles by taking the lessons of Silicon Valley, such as the minimum viable product. So I put all of these things together, and I eventually would form Immortal Studios, which is basically taking the playbook out of how Marvel was able to do it, which is to build an iconic brand. Because the most successful entertainment media companies today stand for something. They stand for a psychographic. They represent a certain fandom. So you're not trying to go from one product to the other without any kind of connectivity. So we're putting it all together. So it just felt like, wow, I now realize running Immortal Studios, I'm just, 1 year into this latest incarnation. It's like, wow, I was made to do this. I was born to build it. And there was a reason why my father gave me the lessons and this 20-year foray in all aspects of media, culture, politics, entertainment, technology, including 5 years off, walking and trekking through the Himalayas just gave me a certain perspective that I really believe in, and I'm dying to share it with the people who care about these kind of stories through the Immortal Storyverse.
Yeah, I love that. So a lot of good takeaways from this, and just hearing about the pivots that you made along the way gives us a lot of inspiration, because, a lot of us out there, especially in the Asian Hustle Network, feel like, once we start a career, once we pick a path, we have to stay at the path the whole time. Mm-hmm. And because we don't have experience at other things, we kind of tend not to do it because it's like psychologically we're kind of afraid that you want to do something that you might fail. In your case, it's like, your journey is much longer than most of us. And to hear that your pivot resulted in you living this fulfilling, awesome career in life, it's so inspirational for us to hear. And, it just reminds me of the fact that we just have to overcome what we think that we can't do to just do the things that we know, for the things that we know we can't. The universe sort of helps you in some ways, right? The universe just kind of pushes you and helps you gain more momentum the more you want to do something. And that's amazing. And hats off to you, Peter.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that I think it's super important that you mentioned that your first love was in politics. And it's okay for anyone to pivot, because although, you made that pivot from politics to film and media and entertainment, you found your second love. And I think, you can have both. You can have two different loves. You can fall in love with two different industries, but it's okay to leave one for another one. And, I think that it's really inspirational how you mentioned that, you were in politics and you did get a chance to work on some of the entertainment industry, and you realized that there was magic in storytelling. So it sounded like there was a seed planted from when you were working in politics, kind of, honing you into the entertainment industry. And when you were teaching yourself how to build a studio, how to produce, was this all self-taught, or did you have a mentor and a team?
I've had so many different mentors. Yeah. From industry titans who literally just took me off the street and really extended themselves. And I think we're all beneficiaries of people who championed us and believed in us and supported us, even before we even saw that potential in ourselves. So even to this day, when I have the chance to really just be there for somebody, or stop and give somebody 30 minutes or even more, or you see something in them, you just really choose to make that investment. So I was definitely the beneficiary of that. And I continue to be, because even as you move along, we still need to be championed. Mm-hmm. You still need people who are going to believe in you. You're still going to need just people to give you a pat on the back when you least expect it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah, that goes a long way for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So you've had, 7 different companies that you started. I would love to know just the growth between those companies and, leading up to starting Immortal Studios. How did that kind of prepare you in terms of, starting Immortal Studios, and what type of challenges did you go through in those transitions?
Because most people will want to start one company and be like, okay, I'm done. But you start 7.
Yeah.
I feel like kind of it's like the entertainment or the movie business is an affliction. And I think of entrepreneurialism as an affliction. Because I'm the kind of entrepreneur that when I get very attached to solving a problem, or it usually comes in the form of a vision. It's like an affliction. It's an attachment to an idea that just won't leave you. So I have this rule of thumb that if I think about an idea every day, almost night and day for 30 days straight, it's like God's way of telling me, Peter, this is for you. If I don't hit that passion, then I won't do it. And it just so happens that I was able to get there with 7 ideas, but they actually, what I realized in hindsight is that our experiences build on top of each other.
Yeah.
Including especially the failures. Like I would say that some of my most, I'm talking about utter failures, like just complete wipeouts, just I've had those as well, but it's just like learning how to get up and learning to pull yourself back up and believe in yourself again. To not make lethal mistakes anymore. So I see it as really building, but I would say that fate also has some hand in it, because things don't always happen the way that you want it to. One of my technology companies, we had a shot to be YouTube 2 years before YouTube came along. Had we made a certain market window, 2 weeks out in the market, 2 weeks laid out in the market, made our Series B evaporate, which caused a whole series, a series of chain events. Like, I was not responsible for the first internet bubble, so that was not something that I could have impacted. But those larger forces, like you started off talking this podcast, that there was a career high. Like in 2018, I was literally on top of the world. I had come to this point in my career. I'd become a portfolio. I was running more of my holding company. I had several companies that I was actively managing, but I didn't require full-time commitments to them anymore. So I was able to really up-level myself, and I was climbing back into being an impact player between states. So I had a chance to really put together this multi-billion-dollar investment fund with some of the biggest political and business names to do large-scale infrastructure and transformational investing across multiple industries. So then the US-China trade war hit. Mm-hmm. Even with our political support on both sides at incredible levels, within several months' time, all the money that was raised and the investment projects that were put together, we had to return it. Or I made a decision that it was no longer doable. So, like, who would have thought something like that Donald Trump would come along and disrupt this large, vibrant, cross-border kind of activities that I really devoted myself to doing. So that was like the first thing out of my control. So then I focused on my holding companies. I had a studio, which would later become Immortal Studios, but by then it was more focused on doing movies in the Chinese language space. And then I also had a Hollywood production company that was focused on a different, global projects between Hollywood and China. And within 1 year's time, the trade wars would trigger strong policy backlashes from China that would render that company completely, it was wiped out by a change in the political environment. So again, who would have thought? There's no way that I could have predicted. So all of our hard-won assets, our IP, all of our projects, our contracts, I had to basically write down that business to focus on Immortal. So, and when I focused on early stage Immortal, then the policy environment would change in China such that, and all of three of my major business partners, which were the biggest media companies in China, they went bankrupt or they wrote down their commitment to the industry. So that business was no longer available. Then I had to make a decision what I was going to do next. So this is when I took what was the original idea of Immortal Studios. Now I have spent my life savings trying to salvage and getting to this point that I had to basically write down significant assets and investments of time and energy. And then I took that little idea back to the US. And then I would come home and my dad would pass away due to cancer. So when I found out he had cancer, to saying goodbye, I had basically less than 2 months to say goodbye. And this was the time when I started to formulate an idea to take this inkling of the Immortal Studios to build a universe for this Wuxia content, the storyverse, that what I'm doing today. So, from 2018, thinking that I would be a, incredibly transformational fund manager into running these different assets, into running a content company in China, into coming back to the States, losing my dad, and then acquiring his library, putting together the funding ready to launch Immortal Studios in the beginning of 2020 with some major backing again, and then have it all pulled away because of COVID.
Yeah.
That's tough.
So it was like 5 or 6 body blows within months of each other. So, but this is not supposed to be a sad story, but I think this is what happens in life. And this is what entrepreneurs, when you have a dream and when you really put yourself out there, those are the kind of things that we're up against. But the beauty and the magic of the story is like, because all of these different pivots and transformations that I became super crystal clear about what it is, that we have an opportunity to do. And, I didn't expect COVID to happen. I didn't expect all of a sudden people who look like us to be under attack. We didn't expect to be pariahs in my own country, but this is also a time of awakening, of inclusion, and that by virtue of what we're doing, which has the opportunity to represent Asians on global scale in popular culture and entertainment, is like with a heroic and inclusive theme, is like, how cool is that to be able to serve that? So that was kind of and that's the kind of the market opportunity, not just even, it's a human opportunity that we're just so honored to be leaning into. So it was like through the series of pivots and these things that got me to this point. So my story is pivot again and pivot again. And you know what? Somehow through all of these influences and pivots, I got to do something that I felt like I was meant to do.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, definitely very, very touching story, and you basically describe the entrepreneurial journey in a nutshell. It's a tough journey, and it really tests if you really want this in your passion. And obviously, like, you're very passionate about your work, and I think it reflects through the story that you just told. And I think that it's a great, almost a reality check for all of us to sort of think of as we're going through our own journeys. And, is this entrepreneur journey the right path for us? And on top of that, Immortal Studios.
You don't have a choice though, right? I bet you don't have a choice. You feel like you have a choice, but when you're looking at it, and just like, I feel like that's where entrepreneurs are amazing, because you're called by something.
Yeah, it's a tough journey, even for us too. Like, some days we wake up, we're like, why do we do this to ourselves? But some days it's like the best rewarding thing ever, because you're seeing an impact that you're making in the world. You're seeing your vision come true. You're pushing out a new reality, which is the most rewarding thing. And I know you're building a universe in Immortal Studios. Can you talk quickly a bit about your characters that you created, the universe that you're going to create or have created? Because you want to learn more about that, and be able to support you in your vision.
Well, first of all, for Wuxia lovers, there's actually like 4 or 5 different subgenres that people like. Whether if you like Bruce Lee, or you're into the Karate Kid, that's more grounded kind of thing, or you like a Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, where the powers are more fantastical, or you're kind of in an immortal world, or you're in the Journey to the West world. Well, what I've done is I've actually put together a storyverse filled with different characters that are interconnected, that represent these 4 big quadrants that historically have never been put together like this before. I've also acquired my dad's entire library of 63 books that has thousands of characters. So I often say, like, on our team, we have the former editor-in-chief of Marvel now. Wow. We also have the head of publishing from DC. So we're able to bring these guys, like the industry titans. But I always say to them, look, you guys have nothing on what we're doing at Immortal, because we have thousands of characters. We have the 63 titles, and we're basically now readapting these stories with a modern backdrop. Because one of my biggest beefs about these kind of stories is that you often think that always happens in ancient China or ancient Asia somewhere. It has no bearing for the modern world. We're like, we're going to change that. So we're basically readapting these stories for a completely brand new audience. So I've created a few stories, and I'm in the process of adapting my dad's. And by the time, 2 years from now, we would have launched 10 different series that's going to lay the foundation for everything else that we're going to do in movies, television, games, immersive, themed entertainment, and lifestyle. So we're really, really committed to using these stories to awakening the hero in everybody we touch, because I think it's really about that. But our journey is going to be a lot more specific on how you could pull yourself up, how you can believe in yourself, and how to follow your dreams. So those are like the lessons that I've learned along the way, because without it, I would have been fallen. So in some ways, I've kind of, I'm living proof that you can do it.
Yeah, I love that. And, it might be a weird request, but we want to request to be a character inside your universe in the future. Okay, wait a minute, that guy looks like me.
I think we talked a little bit about this, and one of the things that we're really excited about leaning into is representing the diverse range of Asian faces, experiences, aesthetics, because it really takes more than 1 part, 2 part, 3 part, 4 part, 5 part. It really takes like a whole storyverse. Because it's taken us thousands of years to get to this point. And one of the biggest beefs I have with being underrepresented is because whatever you come out with has the responsibility of making everybody happy, which is just not possible. But if you consider that the world is 60% Asian, and that if you rely on mainstream Western press to look at it, you would think that it's about 1%, which is kind of a dangerous thing if you think about it. Not just from a political or cultural point of view, just that people are severely, it's not reflective of realities. It's not reflective of what the world really looks like. And I think that's a very important thing. So.
Absolutely. I just wanted to thank you for sharing that. I think, about what we were talking about before, how we're in such a in a difficult time, I think it's very much needed for us to have these, stories and comics to refer to kind of like you said, reawaken their inner hero, right? Because for the kids that are out there, and even if they aren't kids, for anyone who's just a reader, for them to find inspiration from these stories is just so important. To see people who look like them, right, is just so inspirational, because we don't see that all the time. And we definitely need more of that. Which is why I want to learn about like the creative process that you go through to kind of like bring these stories to life. And if there was like one specific inspiration, whether that be like a thing or a person that really was the inspiration behind Immortal Studios or these stories overall.
Well, it's both. My father obviously has been a massive inspiration because he taught me the ropes through reading him. Traveling through these ancient mountains of China. And, I've had a chance to work directly with the top warrior monks of the Shaolin Temple, which is where the Kung Fu was born. And I've had the benefit of working directly with a lot of real profound masters who are extraordinary. So they've all inspired me. So I don't treat it like fiction. I treat it as reality. I treat it as truth. So it's just really, it's the confluence of all of these different experiences. And then when I sit down to create a story or I'm adapting a story, that it just kind of, the inspiration just comes, and now it's also collaborating with a tremendous team that we've assembled of other writers, other creators and artists and visualizers. So all of it really coming together. I would just give a pitch for the comic medium, because I come from traditional entertainment. It sometimes takes, well, first of all, most movies people develop never get made. If you're lucky, if you make 5% of the movies you actually develop. So 95% of the other stories, you'll never be seen. They're stillborn. They're sitting in a pile somewhere and they'll never be made. It's incredibly frustrating. And then the ones that get made takes you 10 years. And if you're lucky, millions and millions of dollars and so many different chefs in the kitchen. But the purity of going to this comic as a minimum viable product is that, the ideas that I had last year were already out in the market.
Yeah.
So the beauty of that, and in the process of doing this, I've actually become a creator in my own right. Up until this point, I've just been a producer or a CEO, but in fact, the book that I wrote, that I adapted from my favorite book written by my father called Chronicles of the Immortal Swordsman, was just launched on Kickstarter. We use Kickstarter as a way to activate our initial fan base. So it was launched 2 weeks ago, and it was funded within the first day. Now it's trending to be a popular comic. And I'm also very proud of the fact that this comic stars a young Asian man in a time when you don't see these kind of faces, not just for Asian kids, but I think it's very important for me that other people who are not used to seeing Asian faces in heroic and main parts get used to that as well, because I think that's part of what we want to share, not just for fellow Asians, but we want to take the message to everybody. Also very proud that our first story was starring an Asian woman, Depth. So it's fully representing, it's not just a racial thing, it's also a gender thing, it's a psychographic thing, so we're very proud of the beginning that we've had, and we're still, incredibly young. So, we're basically 2 stories into our probably 100 story universe. So my hope and goal is that, 5 years when we sit down and have this conversation, we'll have theme parks by then.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, love that. And congratulations on your Kickstarter. That's amazing.
Dream big.
Yes. And, obviously the wuxia genre has a storied history in the East and has had a past and present influence in the West. How do you ensure that you continue to maintain that influence, as well as to elevate it and modernize it during this time?
Well, first of all, I think it has to be authentic.
Yeah.
Because I'm also a martial artist myself, and I've learned, and I know enough to know that I don't know anything. But, even within it, because right now martial arts or Wuxia is almost created by people who like the genre, but they're taking their notes from, say, something they saw that was made in the 70s, or they're inspired by another film. There's nothing wrong with that, but like we take our inspiration from the legends, from the source material, from the practitioners themselves, from the real practitioners and solid ideas, and going back to like the founding ideas of how these come to be. So we're bringing it into a real authentic point of view that I think is very much missing. That's why people would say, oh, it's chopsaki, or they give it a lot of pejorative names, but they don't know that it's actually, it's an incredibly aspirational, beautiful, philosophical, romantic, transformational body of knowledge and work that is life-changing. So that is really our perspective. And I think during this moment of darkness and transition for humanity, everybody is looking for, in a media-driven world, we get our meaning, we get our energy from stories and media. Mm-hmm. But which media company is really going out there and thinking of that, I want to tell stories that inspire people's souls. I want to tell stories that would transform you, that would give you a hug and support you and give you kind of a roadmap to unleashing your own dreams. Like that's my vision for the Wuxia that we're telling for this moment. And that's why I think we could be incredibly compelling in the public square of ideas today.
Amazing. I love that answer. And Peter, we have one last question for you. And that is, what one advice could you give to an aspiring entrepreneur? And how would you advise them to reawaken their hero?
I think the simple one is just to really to give yourself permission to dream. Mm-hmm. Really believe in yourself. Go out there and try it. And I would say, and surround yourself with amazing people who believe in you, who are going to support you. But first, you just have to give yourself that. You just have to give yourself permission to go out there and to be bold, to dream, and to not worry about how it's going to happen. Because in my experience as a Chinese kid who had no political friends, who didn't even know how I was going to get into politics, it was just really believing that somehow it was going to happen and daring to hold it long enough for the world to catch up.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. Thank you so much, Peter. And how can our listeners find out more about you and Immortal Studios online?
For people who like what we're doing, I would say go to our website, immortal-studios.com. If you're interested in backing our projects, go to Kickstarter and look for Chronicles of the Immortal Swordsman. I'm also known as Ancient Futurist on Insta. Those are, I think, enough handles.
Yeah.
Right. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story with us today, Peter. It was amazing learning about you.
Thank you, Peter. I appreciate you. And I'll see you around, especially on Clubhouse.
Thank you for this time. By the way, I've never talked about this pivot again. So that's all brand new. So thank you for letting me process my life in this special way today.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
We learned a lot from you, and you're definitely inspiration to all of us. Appreciate you. Hey guys, we hope you enjoyed this episode. Please subscribe to the show.
We would like to get to the top 10 on iTunes, so be sure to leave us a 5-star review. We release an episode every single Wednesday, so stay tuned.
Thank you guys so much.